Hello there, my very good friends. Andy here for WhatCulture Wrestling, flying solo today without the aid of one of my usual running buddies to bring you this, a deep dive on just what the heck is going on with WWE and their increasingly tumultuous relationship with their talent roster. 2019 has been an exceedingly chaotic year for a company so used to sitting in a seemingly invincible market position without a single fear of ever being toppled. WWE have been comfortable for years, way too comfortable in fact, and this year has served up the kind of chaotic storm that they haven't had to deal with in decades. There are currently some very big problems brewing backstage in WWE, and to illustrate them, let's run through a couple of the company's recent controversies, starting with Lio Rush. Now, we've already covered what we know about this situation in various news videos, so for now, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. Basically, Rush has backstage heat for rubbing other talent the wrong way, and this has resulted in him seemingly being blacklisted from main roster shows. Lio, to his credit, hasn't taken any of this lying down, and he posted his first rebuttal on April 25th. The core of it was this, and I quote, "The fact is, no matter what you do in life, you'll always have people out there that'll try to tear you down. I love what I do, and I have been in love with dreams of being in my current situation since I was 5 years old. I am a young, hungry, and humble husband, a passionate African-American male in America who takes his passion seriously and will do whatever it takes to change mine and my family's situation." And really, it's hard to argue with anything he says there. Now, since Rush posted this, we've had several new reports on the situation, and May 1st brought a big interview with the man of the hour himself, conducted via Fightful Select, and it brought out some pretty shocking revelations. It's a really excellent must-read piece from Fightful, and it's a real shame that most outlets are only covering the allegations Rush made, suggesting that an old Ring of Honor enemy is currently spreading these rumours to try and get him fired. Don't believe me? Well, here are a few choice quotes from the interview. On working with Bobby Lashley, Lio said, "My issue isn't with my on-screen role. My issue is that I haven't been on meet and greets with Bobby and haven't been getting paid for merchandise for us that has my catchphrases on it." Now, here's another bomb to go with that. "I have been sent to live shows and forced to pay my own rental car for 5 days at a time, as well as my own hotel, while not making enough money to do so. Walking around broke in the biggest sports entertainment industry that there is, while having 2 kids and a wife to support." This is important stuff. Basically, Rush is saying that he isn't getting paid enough to even cover his own basic road expenses, and that he's been missing out on royalties for his own catchphrases. So let's get the abacus out. Let's crunch some numbers. A recent report from the Sports Business Journal suggested that WWE developmental talents currently earn somewhere between $50,000 and $150,000 per year, with the average sitting at around 80 grand. Now, Rush is relatively new to the main roster, so let's say he's sitting towards the upper end of that scale, or perhaps a little bit higher. Given that Randy Orton once claimed that his road expenses sit somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 per year, it's pretty easy to understand the source of Rush's frustration. Now, granted, he probably isn't paying as much as the Viper, but the point still stands. I have another quote for you here as well, and this one is to do with the recent report that Rush refused to pay his dues by carrying around water for veteran wrestlers on a recent European tour, as is some kind of wacky backstage custom. He says this, "Public perception is important to me, and when we have fans all over the globe watching us get off buses and into hotels, the look of a black kid carrying waters and bags for other wrestlers just isn't a good look." And really, unless you're in Rush's specific situation at this current point in time, none of us can really argue with that. Now, to cycle back to the monetary aspect of this, as pointed out by Voices of Wrestling on Twitter, Rush is currently charging around about $20 for those little cameo video clips. Now that, well, it's an utterly ridiculous situation for any main roster star to find themselves in, and he isn't even the only one. Shelton Benjamin, Big E, Lacey Evans, loads of others are doing it. Now, wrestler pay is a very difficult topic to analyse because salary numbers don't often make it to the internet, and when they do, they're usually pretty inaccurate. That being said, we can probably all agree that a wrestler should be able to pay their road expenses without being broke. as Rush alleges. But what we can do, based on information from the aforementioned Sports Business Journal article, is run through some numbers brought to light by Brandon Thurston Howard, who, if you don't know, is really a must follow for anyone interested in WWE financial analysis. He recently crunched the numbers on current WWE salaries using a figure from 2011 in which the company stated that the average main roster wrestler earns somewhere in the region of about $550,000 a year. Now, Thurston estimates that today's numbers are probably around about 20% higher, which comes out at $660,000 per annum. Now, given that we already know that the average developmental salary is somewhere around $80,000, we could take these numbers, we can multiply them by the estimated number of talent currently under WWE employ, which at the moment sits somewhere around 215, and we can come out with a number of $75 million paid out every single year in talent wages. And speaking of that average wage of $660,000, that $500,000 offered to the Revival to make them stick around really doesn't sound all that hot anymore, does it? Now, these numbers sound like a lot, and make no mistake, they are. But here's the thing, the company generated $930 million in revenue in 2018. So if you crunch the numbers, that means that just 8% of that figure went back to the talent. As Thurston points out, players on NBA, MLB and NFL teams currently earn somewhere in the region of 47 to 50% of their franchise's revenue. That figure is almost 6 times what WWE's is. So as well as forcing wrestlers to succumb to brutal road schedules, WWE currently only pay them a tiny fraction of what the promotion actually earns. Yet they continually bask in the glory of every single record-breaking balance sheet. Until the last one, that is. Moving on to new matters now, and a recent report from the Wrestling Observer newsletter suggested that WWE were now listening to their fans because they didn't want to be seen as, and I quote, the bad guy promotion. But just a few days after this story came out, the company decided out of pure spite that they were going to add 6 months to Want-Away star Luke Harper's contract. And 1 week later, they added a further 2 months to Dash Wilder's. They're able to do this to their independent contractors due to terms in their contracts that wouldn't exist if WWE hadn't been sitting on this ivory tower for years, knowing they can get away with absolutely anything they want. Other recent controversies include the Sasha Banks situation, with the boss seemingly no closer to returning to television after trying to resign from the company over WrestleMania 35 weekend. We have also seen a major star in Dean Ambrose walk out of the door as a result of creative frustrations. The same goes for Ty Dillinger and TJP, who are also gone. And now we have guys like Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows reportedly turning down multi-million-dollar deals because they just don't want to be there anymore. This isn't the happy, harmonious locker room that the company purport it to be, and how can it be when so many wrestlers want out of what should be the most lucrative gig in the game? This is the biggest company in the world, for God's sake, and half the roster's trying to quit. And by creating these situations themselves, WWE are effectively digging themselves into a dark, dark hole for no reasons other than spite and greed. Why won't they pay their wrestlers more than 8% of their massive revenue? Well, it's because they want to make their balance sheet look nice and shiny for all those investors. Why won't they let people like the Revival and Luke Harper, who they really aren't doing anything with, move on to somewhere else where they'll be more appreciated? Well, it's because they're really, really greedy. They want to hold all the talent, and they want to deprive competition of potential assets. Why do they keep going back to Saudi Arabia despite the public backlash? Millions of dollars. But here's the thing about all of this. The game is changing. We are now approaching a situation where WWE can no longer afford to get away with these things, and it's reflected in their awful viewership, backstage turmoil, and declining financials. The more situations like this that come to life, the more public figures like John Oliver latch onto them, and the more public this thing becomes, the more negative impacts it starts having on things like the company's stock price. When you're in a monopoly, you can effectively do whatever the hell you want with minimal consequences, but guess what? Competition is back, and it's something we should all be rooting for. Root for AEW, root for New Japan, root for Ring of Honor, and any other promotion that may force WWE to take a long, hard look at these destructive practices because competition is the only thing that can change them. People like Sasha Banks weren't making stands like this in 2018 because the situation just didn't exist. Now it might not last and there's still every chance that AEW might not succeed, but the biggest victory that Tony Khan and company could score is changing the working conditions to benefit everyone in the industry, whether they work for AEW, WWE, or anyone else. Lio Rush should be able to cover his travel expenses and still live comfortably. Luke Harper, well, he shouldn't have to wait an extra 6 months to get out of his contract just because he got injured last year. WWE wrestlers should be full-time employees, not independent contractors. Vince McMahon shouldn't be able to get away with paying his roster just 8% of his revenue. Now, I'm not saying that AEW is going to provide some kind of miracle cure here, but they've already changed the way WWE do business with regards to things like talent acquisition. Perhaps there'll be bigger changes elsewhere as well. Whatever the case, these recent controversies are making WWE look horrible. They were Teflon for the best part of 2 decades, and it'll be really interesting to see how they react now that this is wearing off and public perception is really starting to sour. After all, their viewership is currently declining at a rate almost 3 times faster than the average TV network. And the topics I've just discussed almost certainly have something to do with that. So good on guys like Lio Rush for standing up for themselves and speaking out. Let's hope it makes a difference. Anyway guys, that's my take on the matter. Now I'm sure you don't need an invitation to do so, but go ahead and leave yours down in the comment section below. Once you've done that, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Once you've done that, you can follow us on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE, and you can even follow myself at Andy H. Murray. Let's get a conversation going on how we can make wrestling a better place for everyone involved. Goodbye.